I wanted to talk a little bit about other bases for processing other than consent. But there you have consent, of course. But you also have performance of a contract. And this is very important when you are a company and you are providing services or offering goods to individuals, and you collect their data and you use their data in the context of the contract. You do not need consent in order to do it. You are just performing the contract. The legitimate interests of the data controller is also a very important basis for processing. It's an area which, to me, is not entirely clear, the borders, but it's clear that you have certain bases or certain processing activities that you do that are based on the legitimate interests, as we will see. And then, of course, legal obligations. And many companies, in order to comply with the law, need to collect data and process the data, and they do not need to rely on consent in order to do that. As well, other legal grounds that are relatively rarely used are the vital interests of the data subject and also the performance of a task in the public interest. So, conditions for consent. Now, consent needs to be clear, affirmative, and unambiguous. You really need to manifest your consent in an affirmative manner. It cannot be presumed. So if you have a pre-ticketed box, or you say that if you do not object, we will assume your consent, no, that will not be valid. And when you provide your consent, it needs to be informed. So you need to provide a number of information, which will be more or less according to the situation, to the circumstances. But you really need to provide, in a clear and concise manner, a lot of information to the data subject that you can see there. The controller's identity, storage periods, information on international transfers, etc. Also needs to be specific. And specific means you really need to do this exercise. See what you are processing based on the execution of a contract and remove that from the consent. Then what relies on legitimate interests. And the remaining bit, like marketing purposes, you will actually indicate what exactly you will use the data for and ask for this specific consent at the end of the contract. It doesn't need to be only marketing, but everything that relies on consent, you should really specify, and so that the consent will be granular. Obviously, this is terrible for marketing people, because what marketing people want is an easy way to obtain consent, and the easiest way is to presume consent. It's also easier not to have specific consent in different boxes, but to have only one box. I know that very well. It's strange, and sometimes as a lawyer, I mean, I'm a lawyer, but I also understand the needs of business. But you really need now to try and be very specific and to obtain the consent for whatever activity based on consent that you want to do. And it must be freely given. So the consent must not be given in a context like a labor agreement, a labor contract. It will not be presumed to be free. So you cannot rely on consent for most things that you do with your employee data. So if there is a clear imbalance between the individual, the data subject, and the controller, it will be presumed not to be free, the consent, and it will not be acceptable, the consent. So I have here all different, because we are a bit pressurized with time, I will not go into a lot of detail, but for instance, if you have a contract that you are going to sign with the service provider, and the contract demands that you consent for publicity or direct marketing to be sent in order to sign the contract, it's a condition. Obviously, that consent will not be freely given and will not be valid. So the request for consent must be presented clearly, intelligibly, intelligibly and easily in an easily accessible form. You must set it aside from other parts of the document so that it's clear that you are providing consent for a specific purpose, and you cannot annoy people online all the time asking consent. So you must also try not to be disruptive when you collect it. And a very important thing is you need to, it's your duty to demonstrate that you obtain that consent. So one very challenging aspect of a company's obligations is, especially when they have historic records of databases where they collected that data for many years, and they don't really know when they collected, how the consent was obtained, in what circumstances. That is a big problem companies have to solve, because they need to demonstrate that the consent, in what circumstances the consent was given, and they need to have proof that they obtained such consent. So going now to legitimate interests. So I have there, I mentioned two opinions from the Article 29 Working Party, which gather the data protection authorities, the Commission from the EU, and also a recent and interesting work from a group, the Data Protection Network, on the use of legitimate interests under the GDPR. And this is an area that, although it's been already, a lot has been written about it, I think needs still further clearance and further development. But basically, from the opinions of the Article 29 Working Party, we understand that this type of basis for processing must be applied in a very restricted manner. Okay, so you must also do a balance between the interests of the controller and the interests of the individual. And the companies need to clearly inform when they are collecting the data that they will process it under their legitimate interests, and they must specify which interests these are. So people must be aware that their data are being processed for this and that reason, and what grounds really are being used, and what are the reasons that the data is being processed for. So this is an exercise that needs to be done. For instance, when you organize your documentation as a company in order to demonstrate compliance in case of an inspection by a DPA, you need to think ahead of the motives that you are processing that data. And in particular, when you have a legitimate interest, you must really set it very clearly before you do anything with the data, before you collect even the data. Also, the individuals must be given the right to object to the processing of the data, and as usual, the burden of proof is with the controller. So, legitimate interests, together with the execution of the contract, are used very much in a labor context, in labor relations. There we have also a recent opinion from Article 29 Working Party, and also working documents, so you can see all that on the internet. But basically, the authorities, the data protection authorities in the EU reaffirmed recently that consent is not the best basis to process data in a working environment. In most cases, you need to, you use basically the data in order to execute your labor agreement. Okay, so everything connected with management of personnel, of staff, and everything connected with organizing the workforce and the data collected for that effect. The basis for that is the execution of the labor agreement. And then you may decide to offer your employees a plan, a health plan, for instance. Something that they can subscribe, but they're not obliged. And it's no big deal if they don't subscribe. I think there you'll be able to rely on consent. But in most cases, you won't. You also have legal obligations that you must comply with in a labor relationship. So the processing of data in order for social security reasons, in order to declare taxes and do the withholding obligations with the tax authorities, you rely also, this is a legal obligation, so you rely on legal obligations and not in consent in order to do that. And when you see legitimate interests, for instance, well, when you set, for instance, one whistleblowing line, okay, this is not a legal obligation. Very often, it's not the law of the country that imposes that, but it's something that you want to have in your company in order to obtain information